In this section we will work on the patio that goes under building 1, that is the sweet shop. So I've pulled out from my baggie the piece labeled patio and the piece labeled patio extension. I also have the template here in front of me. It's one of the sheets from the template set that's labeled Sweet Shop Patio and Reindeer Yard. And the patio is this piece at the bottom. So first we want to mark a center point from which we can draw this semicircle, and we are going to measure in 1 inch and 9/16 from one of the ends, and then we'll mark center, which is 1 inch and 9/16 as well. 9/16 is a 1/16 inch more than half, so I'll just line up my ruler so that it is a 1/16 inch more than half and draw a line this way. And then I can do the same thing, or else I can just find center by putting my piece on the craft mat. And with a longer ruler I can mark center going this way. And that gives me the center point that I can use for my compass. And I'll set my compass to 1 inch and 9/16. I'll just use the measurements on my craft mat here at the bottom. You can't see that, but I'm setting that to 1 and 9/16. And then I can put the point of the compass right there on that center. And when I mark this semicircle, it should come right to the edges on the 3 sides. There, I think you can see it that way. Now I want to mark one other line on here, and that is 3 1/8 from the square end. So I'll just turn this around this way and mark 3 1/8 from that square end. Now I want to cut on these semicircular lines here, and the best way to do that is to first cut within about 1/8 of an inch of that line, just a rough cut, and then you can cut exactly on the line. Next I'll take some temporary adhesive, and I'm going to adhere the extension coming up to that line. And then I'll trace around the cut edges here. And once I have those edges traced, I'll go ahead and cut that out as well. And in case my sides aren't cut exactly the same, I'm just going to put the word up on here so I know which side goes up. It's obvious on my patio which side goes up because it has the markings on there. Next I'm going to take a piece of scrap paper and put my patio extension on there and just draw around it, so I'll have a template for decorative paper in the future. I'll just write patio, and I can put this piece aside. Now if I have any temporary adhesive on here, I'll just rub on that and remove it, and then I'll glue these 2 pieces together on that line. And then I'm just going to put this piece under some weights and allow it to dry thoroughly. Now that our piece has thoroughly dried, I'm going to use an emery board to smooth these edges so they are nice and even all the way around. Once you've used your emery board on all the edges, you really shouldn't be able to tell that there's 2 pieces of chipboard there. And then we'll take our marker and we'll go along that edge. I like to go just a little bit on that edge on the bottom, and then we'll come just like we have on other pieces, about a 1/4 of an inch or at least 1/8 of an inch along the curved sides here and along the edge of the extension. And you should also do all of these edges. I forgot. Do all of the vertical edges. I usually like to come just a little bit in on that top edge. Okay, so we've got that prepped. Now this is building number 1. We're going to glue the patio to building number 1. Here's the niche side. Here's the side that's been marked center. The side that's marked center is the side that the patio is going next to. So the bottom should fit exactly on building number 1. And we'll just take some wet glue in this section and put building number 1 onto that. Just make sure it's all nice and square. One way to make sure everything is aligned is to put it in this orientation where the building is flat on your table and the patio is coming flat down too. You can use your fingers here to make sure that it is fitting side to side. And just hold that for a second till the glue grabs and then put it aside to dry. And you can check all of these edges and corners and make sure that they are nice and aligned. Building 6 is the reindeer barn, and it has a yard that extends from it. And again, we'll use that same template sheet that we had the patio on. There are 2 chipboard pieces that should be labeled yard in your 6 baggie. So we'll start with one of those. And then we'll measure in for the center point of this part of a circle. We'll come in 2 inches from the left and 2 3/16 inch down from the top. So I'll make those measurements. Once I have this point marked, I'll set my compass to a 2.5 inch radius, and then I'll draw this arc. I've drawn that arc on there. And now I'm also going to mark these a line. It's kind of here in red, but it's going to come 3 5/8 inch down from the top and 3 1/8 in from the left side. Those are the dimensions of building number 6. So here I'm measuring 3 1/8. And here I'm measuring 3 5/8. Those will be positioning lines for building 6 when we put it on there. We also, if the curve comes a little bit away from where that point is, just start your curve at that point and then follow it around. We're going to cut that out, and again, cut out about 1/8 of an inch outside of that line to begin with, and then cut on the line, and that will make it much easier. And then using a sharp craft knife, cut out this rectangle. And then bring in your building number 6 and just check the fit there. The corners should come right there and right here. I'm going to write the word top on this just so that I don't forget. It's not symmetrical, but just in case. And then I'll bring in this same piece of paper that I made my patio template on, and I'll draw around this piece. So I'll have a template for pattern paper. Now take some temporary adhesive on the piece that I cut out to begin with, and put it on the corner of my second piece. Make sure that's all lined up really well. and then put some temporary adhesive on the back of this piece that we cut out and fit that in place. And then trace around this edge. I've removed this piece. I've left the rectangle in place, and I'll cut around the curved edge here. Once I have that curve cut out, I'm going to put some wet glue on this piece after I remove the temporary adhesive, and glue this piece onto the bottom. This piece is just there to help us align. It's just on there with a temporary adhesive. Now I'll just use some clothespins as clamps, and before this glue sets up, I'll remove this panel that's in here with a temporary adhesive so no glue comes under the edges and sticks it to it. And then we'll just allow this to set up and dry thoroughly. Once the two pieces have dried, we're going to do just like we did with the patio, take an emery board to this edge and get those edges to be nice and flush. Once we have our edges all nicely finished, I'll take my marker along the entire edge. Once I've done the edge, I'll come along the top for that 1/4 inch, and then also along the edge of the extension here. Then once you've finished with your inking, you can bring in building number 6. I have the yard oriented in this direction. Here are the niches. They will face to the left so that the yard is on the two sides without niches. And it should fit right into that corner so that when you glue it in, all of the other two edges align. So I'll just put some glue on this piece, put this piece in, get it up, make sure it's all aligned, and just put some pressure on that for a little bit so it dries nicely. And this is what building 6 looks like once the yard has been attached. The annex on building 4 has a shed roof, and that means that we will, on the two narrow sides, we will measure down 1/2 inch on one side only and connect that tick mark with the corner and cut off that triangle. And I'll repeat that for the other side. Now that I have the two pieces cut, I'm going to take my decorative paper and put some temporary adhesive on it, and I'm making sure that I have mirror images going on here, and with the temporary adhesive I will attach each one to one of the sides and then cut off those gables. And then I'll put this pattern paper back in my baggie. Then I'll take my two sides and I'll have the longer end facing in, and I'll put the back in between them, and this is the front, and it's going to go over on this side. And then I'll take joining strips and put a joining strip on the left side of each one. Once I have joining strips attached to the left side, I'll align all of these on a line on my craft mat and butt them together and join them in a row. I will leave the last one with the tab over here and not make it three-dimensional yet. I gave all those joins a burnish, and now I'm going to turn it on its side and line up the point down here with a line on my craft mat and this short side over here with a line on my craft mat. And then I will draw a line that goes across the back and that will help me with my ledger placement. For our ledger strips, I'll again refer to our ledger strips for building section here under Annex 4. The narrow base has a 3/4 inch. Again, we're holding these back 1/16 of an inch from the bottom edge. And the wide base, we have a wide base, a top, and a tip top. So I'll do the wide base first, and that's going in down here at the bottom, a 1/16 of an inch away from the edge. And then I've got a 2.5 inch piece, which is an end piece, and I'll hold that back from the right edge so I have room for my joining strip. And now let's turn it around and work on the tops. And here, this top piece, we're going to put in one of our, we have 2 at 2 3/4 left and 1 at 2 1/2. The first 2 3/4 is going to go a 1/16 of an inch below that line we drew. And the other 2 3/4, I call it the tip top, is going to go a 1/16 of an inch below the actual top, and both of those get centered. And then we have one last 2.5 inch piece that will go a 1/16 of an inch below this front edge. Again, we'll hold it back here for our joining strip to come in. And I'll burnish all of those down. This one can also go together in a flat configuration. Just watch these bottom edges here, and then just butt these 2 remaining sides up. Then you can reach in and burnish. I made sure everything was square and tight down here, and then I can run a bead of glue along the second one down on the back and along the front here. And I can put my squiggly glue line along the sides and then put in the top piece. I'll give that some good pressure and put a rubber band around that as well. And then we can just set that aside to dry. The annex for building 8 has a gable, and so we'll start by taking the 2 wide sides and marking a line across the top 3/4 of an inch down from the top. 3/4 of an inch down from the top. Once you have those lines drawn, turn it upside down and find the center point. I'm just centering it on my craft mat, marking a center point. Then I'll connect for that center point to the edges over here and cut off the 2 triangles for the gable, and I'll repeat that on this side as well. Next, I'll cut some joining strips and install them on the left side of each piece. Next, I'll join these together, aligning them on my craft mat, and of course I won't join this last one yet. I almost forgot to trim off my decorative paper, so I'm going to just put a little temporary adhesive. The white side is the good side, and I'll just align this with the last panel on my building, and then I can cut off these 2 gables. On this annex, we only have 1 piece of decorative paper because the other side is glued to building 8. Next, I'll refer to the ledger strips for buildings, the Annex 8, and for the narrow base, there's 2 of those. I'll go down here on the narrow base, a 1/16 of an inch away, as usual. And then we have a wide base that is 2 1/4 that we can put on. And we have an end piece that's 2 inches. Remember to allow this space at the end. Then we can flip it over this way. We'll put 4 pieces on the ridge, and we'll make sure we don't go past the ridge line. Trim off a little corner if you need to. And then the other piece that's wide base or top, that's 2 1/4, we'll hold it back a 1/16 of an inch below the line we drew. And we'll do the same thing for the end piece, holding it back at that 1/16 of an inch and leaving that at least 3/8 of an inch gap on the outside. And then of course I'll burnish all those pieces down. Now I can join this to make it 3-dimensional, making sure that these edges down here are aligned and reaching in to burnish and then gluing in my base piece. Once I have my base piece in and I've checked it for square, I can run some glue along these long top pieces and put some along the top edge of these 2 pieces and put my top piece in. This top piece actually sits right, it won't get attached to the side pieces. I forgot, it just sits kind of right on top of there, and that's how it's meant to be. And then we can just take our little roof support pieces and just fit them in on the 2 sides. And there'll be a gap at the bottom edges and also at the top, and that's fine. So just put some glue along the little ledger strips here and glue those 2 roof support pieces in. So I'm just holding it with a little pressure, and I put my X brace of rubber bands on as well. And then we can just set the 8 Annex aside to dry. For each of the annexes, I forgot to say to ink along the bottom edges and the top edges, including the gables and the shed here. So make sure you do that. Next, we'll finish all the vertical edges. And every time you put in a vertical edge, you want it to be even with the sides that it is going up against. So for most of these, or a lot of these, it's squared off at the bottom and squared off at the top. So cut a piece to length, remove the tape backing from one side, and then having it in a 90-degree position, and I have the side with the backing still on facing up, I'm just going to slide it down so that I maintain that 90-degree angle there. You can see that it's nice and 90-degree there. And then I can reach in, remove the other backing strip, push that down, and give both sides a good burnish. Now, I have building 1 and building 6 out here because they're a little special down here at the bottom. You'll just want to cut a little notch out of just the front side there. It's about 1/8 of an inch. So let me just cut a little notch here and show you. You can see that's about 1/8 of an inch, and then that will fit nicely around this side and then come right to the bottom right here in front. And obviously on this side you would cut the 1/8 inch notch out of the other way. And on building 6 you have a notch on these two corners, but this corner in the middle will of course be flat down here. If you have a building with gables, I'll do it on this corner. The bottom will be flat. You'll want to get a pencil and trace the angle of that gable on this side so it can cut off exactly even, and then where the flat edge is on this side, so that you end up with a piece that has this kind of a shape, so that it goes all the way up to that gable and flat on this side, and that'll give you the nicest look. So go ahead and finish all of the edges of the buildings that we've done so far and the 2 annexes.